What's up everybody, Coach Mills here, and today we're going to be breaking down the new patch tank tier list. We're getting a lot of changes to tanks and other characters in the game that is going to have a really big effect on the meta, so we're going to break down and talk about what tanks are most viable, what tanks you should be thinking about playing, and what also is the strategies that you could incorporate to have more success after the patch. Now, if you enjoyed this type of content, do me a huge solid and smash that like and subscribe. And if you want private coaching, go check out the Patreon in the links below, and let's get into it. Now, before we get started in this tier list, I want to make it clear that this is not only going to be based on the highest level or pro play. A lot of these tier lists that are out there are really going for the meta, but you have to also understand that the meta doesn't decide everything. And of course, in a plat game or in a solo carry game, there are some characters that are going to work far better than the coordination and skill level you get at higher levels or in pro play. So I'm combining them all, and I'm making a tier list that is trying to be a fit for everybody. Now, that being said, let's jump right into it and start off with Winston. And yes, he's also S tier in meta, but he's going to be S tier in ranked play as well. Winston is going to be the new best tank going forward. And if you are a tank player and you really want to have a lot of success, I highly suggest Winston. And there's several reasons for Winston getting so strong. For one, Zarya is a character that is going to be a lot harder to play for the average person. And even before, with Winston Mastery, Winston already was one of the best picks against Zarya. He was very good. So when you combine those two things together, Winston becomes a really strong character. And then in addition to that, when characters that can dive in, when DPS characters want to go for these plays on the flank, Winston can create a ton of space. His bubble is a ridiculously powerful cooldown. Anyone who is around your bubble when you use your bubble gets value from that. And all in all, he's just a fantastic character. He plays incredibly well with the meta supports right now, Lucio and Kiriko, and yeah, he's a character that I think is definitely worth grinding, and you're going to play against a lot. Now, there's several things that you need to make sure that you can do if you want to lock this monkey. You need to learn how to play against some of your counters. You're going to go up against a lot of Reapers, who's a character that is going to be played a lot as well. Winston can play around Reapers. He just has to play in and around his bubble, make sure that he doesn't actually dive this Reaper, make sure that he's not full committing to him unless you have your leap out. You can play around a Reaper and still get value. And the other thing that you need to do is make sure that you're practicing your Primal Rages. I always suggest practicing it in like a training room where you have unlimited Primal Rages up against bots, and just go on Ilios and just like knock Honest off for like a couple hours, and you're going to get absolutely cracked at Primal Rages. Learn those two things, play the monkey, and you're going to climb. Now, next up, we got to talk about Zarya. And Zarya has a 1 second cooldown increase on her bubbles, and her bubbles are going to last not as long. So we actually go right into the developer notes. The bubble duration is reduced from 2.5 to 2 seconds, and the barrier increased from 10 to 11 seconds. Now, does this make Zarya just flat out weak? No, she still has a ton of carry potential, but the window of opportunity to actually bubble someone is going to be smaller. So you have to be more disciplined with your use. And in addition to that, you're not going to have bubbles as much throughout the course of a game. Does that mean that Zarya is unplayable? Absolutely not. She's still fantastic, and she can still be a hard carry. She's just not going to be the end-all be-all that she was before. And especially with a tank like Winston being so good, already was good against pre-Zarya, who was buffed up, and he's still good now. Zarya gets hurt even more because of that. So she is kind of a dog in the matchup, and she's harder to play now. So instead of being like top of the S tier now, she's getting moved down to the A tier. Still fantastic, still a really great pick, but you know, like an average Zarya is not going to be able to get as much value anymore, and you're going to have to be a lot better in order to get the same amount of value. Next up, let's actually talk about Diva. And Diva's an interesting one because Diva is really strong, and she does get nerfs here. If we can look at the balance notes, we can see that Diva has higher spread, and she's not doing as much damage with her boosters, so she has less kill potential. Still has a lot. She still has a ton, even with those changes. But all the things that Diva can do really well are still there. She can peel really well. She just is someone that is very hard to kill. She has great mobility, and Especially because I do feel like a lot of players on Winston that are not that good at Winston will struggle against Reapers and struggle against a lot of the characters that really want to make plays off. Diva, in my opinion, is a tank that is actually sometimes better than Winston in ranked, especially when you're going up against characters that are untraditionally meta, or like characters that wouldn't be meta at the highest level but are meta in ranked. So characters like Ana, Diva gets extra value against. A lot of hit scans, Hanzo, Ashe, Diva's very, very good against. And even in the Diva v Winston matchup, Diva has an advantage in that matchup. So Diva is actually the second tank that I'm going to put in the S tier. And the biggest reason as well that I'm putting her in the S tier is that Zarya will be a weaker tank. Zarya is one of the biggest things that would lock a Diva down. Shut that Diva down, and of course, Sombra hack is also very annoying. We'll see less Sombras. So Diva is better against a lot of the DPS that are going to be good. Characters like Reaper are going to be better, and Diva's going to be better. And she's also better not playing against all these counters like Zarya. So because of that, she's going in the S tier as well. Definitely let me know if you agree with that take down below. Next up, we got to talk about Roadhog. And yeah, we're seeing a lot of weird Roadhog play in the pro meta, but in ranked play, Roadhog has always been fantastic. He's a very, very great character to just have a ton of impact. There's gaps in a lot of players' play. There's a lot of mistakes. The lower in rank you go, the more mistakes are apparent. And Roadhog can capitalize on that, and he's very hard to kill. In the past, Ana was a great way to shut down a Roadhog, but if you are someone that wants to climb and you're a good Roadhog player, duo with a Kiriko main that will cleanse you, and y'all could just go on a complete tear. Like, just a ridiculous tear. Nothing's going to shut you down. If the Hog ever gets in a sticky situation, he can get bailed out by the Kiriko. And also, I think there's a benefit that Roadhog is not a... he's like a character that is actually decent up against characters like Sojourn and stuff like that, trying to find angles on her. He's not like playing the front line as much, going for these pickoffs. Roadhog's actually really good, and I think he gets even better, like I said, the lower in rank you go. So for these reasons, I'm actually putting Roadhog up into the A tier. A lot of whether or not you can pop off is going to really depend on how good the tank is, the enemy tank is at shutting you down. Like if you're up against a really good Zarya or a really good Diva, they might stop your hook value, and that could be frustrating, and then you're going to swap off. But if that's not the case, or if you're good enough at Hog to make it work, I think that he's a great pick for not only carrying, but climbing up, especially if you're underneath the Diamond rank or underneath the Masters rank. Next up, we got to talk about Hammond. And Hammond is actually a tank that is, I think, a bit underrated. Really strong before, especially if you master Hammond. And now, with Sombra being weaker, although if you start dominating on Hammond, you're still going to have a Sombra being swapped, and they're going to hack you, and you're going to cry. But you can still get value, and I think that Hammond is actually an interesting pick. I would say, as far as dive characters are concerned, these two are just going to be superior the majority of the time, unless you have that absolute mastery on Sombra, or on Wrecking Ball. But yeah, I don't think he's unplayable by any means, and I think he's really good on maps like Koth. I think I'm gonna put him in the C tier. You could make an argument for him being in the B tier as well. It's gonna really kind of depend on the individual, I think. Next up, we gotta talk about Sigma. Sigma's a character that I think also gets powerful, or more powerful, with the Zarya nerfs. He's a character that before he would get pretty hard punished by Zarya because, you know, she would just get a lot of charge and he couldn't really do anything about it. And then she would just really burn all of his resources very quickly. And Sigma still could get success up against some of the other tanks, specifically, you know, tanks like Orisa and Rhine. I think Sigma could get some success, but overall now he's kind of more unleashed. I think he has more power now, especially if we're talking about, you know, the ranks that are not going to be playing hard meta. So anything underneath the Masters rank, I think Sigma is even better than he was before, and I think he's a pretty decent pick if you learn to master him. I'm going to put him in the B tier. Orisa is an interesting one because she's really, really great when players don't know how to properly play around tanks. So like how you're actually supposed to play against an Orisa is you're really supposed to avoid her. Like if you're a DPS player, you don't want to fight the Orisa head on. You want to go for the squishies in the back line, take isolated duels. But if any tank fights like head to head with an Orisa, they're gonna lose, and it really sucks. So what I would say is that Orisa's a character that is actually pretty strong if the enemy is not properly countering you. It's kind of a weird situation because, you know, some games Orisa feels completely broken, and then other games you're like, why do we have an Orisa? This Orisa's throwing. It's a very hot and cold thing, and I think it really comes down to how the enemies are playing around the Orisa. But all that being said, with the overall power level of tanks that brawl like Zarya going down, Orisa is a character that is going to be a bit better. And Zarya was actually one of those characters that was pretty annoying to deal with as an Orisa. She, the bubbles, just double bubble, just way too efficient with her abilities. So, all in all, I think Orisa is actually a little bit better than she was before, and I'm putting her in the B tier. Next up, we got to talk about Rein. Rein's a weird one. Rein's a very weird one, because Rein can be good. And I think that there are some maps that that Rein is better on, of course. Like King's Row, you could definitely play a Rein. I mean, there are other characters that are probably a bit better, but Rein could definitely work. If you have that speed boost, he could be better. And oftentimes, if you're a Rein main, just type Rein 1v1 in the chat, and then you'll just get the other enemy to mirror Rein you. And yeah, that could be fun, I guess. But yeah, no, I think Rein's fine. I think he's good. His ultimate is still incredibly powerful, but there's a lot of these other tanks bring something else to the table that I think is a bit more objectively powerful. And I don't think that you could be like a Rein one trick or anything like that. He's definitely a character you could whip out in some situations, but not a character that you could just expect to be able to carry every single game on. I'm still gonna put him at the bottom of B tier though. Next up, we have Junker Queen. And Junker Queen, unfortunately, needs a buff. She's okay, but the problem that we come across with Junker Queen is that her ceiling power level is just not strong enough. I think that they nerfed her a little bit too hard when they nerfed her, because in the start of beta, she was really, really powerful, and then they nerfed her like really, really hard. And I just think that from an efficiency point of view, you could be doing everything right on this character and still lose. You have to be so much better than your opponent in order to get value that I don't really think that Junker Queen is that worth playing. What I would do is I would put her towards the absolute bottom of C tier. I think Hammond is far and away better than her. I would even make an argument that like Hammond should be like here, actually. Yeah, let's do that. Let's do this. Let's do this. Let's keep it like that. And I think that that is kind of fair, because Junker Queen is just so much worse than Wrecking Ball. I don't really want to put her in the same tier. Now, of course, if you're an absolute god at Junker Queen, by all means, play her and dominate with her. But it's just going to be hard for you to get value if you're of equal skill to someone on any of these other characters. Now, I don't know exactly why he's lost. There you are, Doomfist. Doomfist is in L tier. Sag. In L tier. Yeah, unfortunately, Doomfist is in L tier. Doomfist is just easily countered, doesn't get a ton of value, is worse than 3 other dive tanks, not very disruptive, displacement doesn't matter nearly as much. I made an entire video over the Doomfist problem on this channel that you could definitely go check out if you're interested. But basically, Doomfist needs fundamental changes to abilities like Power Block, so it can potentially block CC, or he needs a rework in some way. He needs an addition of more text that can be useful. There's a ton of changes that they could do, but right now, the problem with Doomfist is that if an enemy wants to shut you down, they can very easily. And there's a ton of CC that just completely rolls you. You know, you could get freaking hooked, you can get rocked, you can get slept, you can get hacked. It's a nightmare for this character. So you know, unless your name's Zebra or get quaked on, don't lock this character. No, all joking aside, I could imagine a future where Doomfist gets crazy strong if they buff him in the right way. So he might be a character worth playing and grinding. But if you're trying to get wins, it's going to be pretty hard to do on this character. So this is the tank tier list. I'm going to be doing a support one as well. And if you missed the DPS one, you can go check that one out on the channel. Let me know if you agree or disagree with any of these picks. And what is your favorite tank to play right now? Not based on power level, but just based on fun. Let me know how you feel about that. And smash that subscribe. We have just about 10% of the community subscribes, so I would appreciate it. And if you want private coaching, go check on the Patreon. The links will be in the description down below, and I'll see ya.